Hello, I'm Boa, otherwise known as Gapes of Siam, and I am a Dreampunk producer. In this video, I'm going to try and outline the genre of Dreampunk as well as I can, and the ways in which I've learned to produce it over time. Just to preface, this video will probably be quite FL Studio centric and probably not too beginner friendly, but I imagine that most of what I say can be applied to other doors, and I'm just going to assume that you're not an absolute beginner to music production. If you don't already know what Dreampunk is, it is a music genre that emerged in late 2013 to early 2014, and according to r/Dreampunk, is characterised but not limited to introspective themes of love, loneliness, isolation, urbanisation and melancholy, along with futuristic motifs influenced by the cyberpunk genre. Comparisons to ambient music and vaporwave can be drawn, but it has split from these two in recent years to become its own genre. In my opinion, some key releases that best characterise the genre are Birth of a New Day by 2814, an alias for HKE and Telepath's collaborative work, Enmesh and Telepath's The Path to Lost Eden, and Chikyu's Jungle, an album from a cat system called Alias. This video will go over both effects and instruments that I've used for Dreampunk production, alongside some sound design techniques amongst various other things. Also, I'll mostly be talking about the classic Dreampunk sound, so I won't really touch on sloshwave or more high-tempo upbeat stuff. If I remember, timestamps should be available in the description to skip to certain sections of the video. Anyway, let's get into it. The most important part of Dreampunk production is the instrumentation. This genre is typically characterised by synths, most noticeably lush, drawn-out pads, but the use of more realistic sounding instruments such as piano or strings is also relatively common. Some great synths can be found stock with FL, including Flex, 3xOSC, and even Citrus, all of which, when you know enough about them, can procure some great Dreampunk-esque sounds. Flex is a personal favourite of mine, as when I'm feeling particularly lazy, I can just scroll through the presets until I find something that I like, and modify it without doing very much. There's also a slew of great free VSTs which provide tons of unique and interesting sounds, such as Spitfire Audio's Labs and Vital. Paid VSTs such as Isotope's Iris can make some really cool sounds, but Iris in particular loves to kill a CPU, so if you do end up getting it, it's best to consolidate the track to prevent playback from sounding like shit. Samples are also a great way to acquire interesting sounds and textures, as long as you have no particular moral issues with sampling. Through Edison, you can create looping synths by blurring sections of samples. I've already made a video on this in the past, but it's really old and bad, so I'll just go over it again now. Alright, welcome back to my FL Studio Let's Play. So this is the sample that we're going to be getting the synth out of today. Lucky Talisman. Somatic from the album I Love Grows Inside. I have no idea whether he'll be horrifically upset that I'm using his song for a sample, but you know, whatever, he's sampling. Fun fact, this is actually a lo-fi house track, so the first thing from Dreampunk possible. Nice bit of unch unch unch. But the thing that we're going to be sampling is this little part at the beginning here, this lovely little pad. So yeah, let's get into it. First thing you want to do is open your sample in this little thing here, right click it, and then you want to set to edit in audio editor. So you're going to get the entire sample up here. You don't need all of this because we only want the intro, so you can cut this bit out. Now, zoom in until there's a part that you think sounds nice. Let's try this bit. Then you want to press Alt and L to get the loop, and then Control and L to get the tune loop. And there you go, it's already starting to loop. You can change the length. As you can see, it like dips a little bit, so maybe you want the length more like here. Change the tension. It makes it sound really strange. Now what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to close that. I'm going to get rid of all of this section over here and all of this section over here. I'm going to press Ctrl A to select it all, Ctrl C and then Ctrl V. As you can see, I'm pasting it a few times at the bottom. I'm going to select that all again. See, it's just a little bit of the pad there. Hit reverb. I've got the dry turned all the way down. The wet up about halfway to prevent clipping. You hit accept. There you go. Now it's a much more even volume. So now maybe I'll select this area between two peaks. Once again, Alt L to select the loop, and then Control and L. I can change the length. I like the sound of that. You can just accept that. You click and hold on this button here, and you can get this little selection here. Drag it into your, drag it with the other clips, and then voila. Look at that. Got a loop that you can play on your keyboard. Change the envelope maybe. And look, we're already at the start of a good sounding Dreampunk track. Lovely. Percussion is another often overlooked part of Dreampunk. Some people prefer to not use any percussion at all, whereas some love erratic percussion all over the place. You can use classic vapor drums with long reverbs and tons of delay, or short snappy percussive fills. Percussion loops, both acoustic and electronic, can all help to improve the track. However, the basic instrumentation is only the infancy of a sound, as the Dreampunk feel comes from the post-processing of the sound through the use of effects. When listening to Dreampunk, it's pretty obvious that most of the sounds are absolutely drenched in reverb, delay, flanges, phases, and choruses. I love to use the FL Studio stock VSTs for all of these effects, excluding Fruity Reverb 2, because it sucks and you shouldn't go near it ever, at least not for Dreampunk. You can't even get a reverb trail longer than 20 seconds, how amateur. Therefore, I far prefer to use Valhalla Supermassive, a free reverb that I reckon I've used on every single sound within any given track due to its versatility, even outside of Dreampunk. It's insane how good it is, as it can replicate room echo, big reverbs, and even slash the fuck out of anything you want with the right preset. My track Lucidity from Eve came about because I stumbled upon a supermassive preset called Barnard 33, which is exceptional at making any synth sound long, drawn out, slushy, and extremely wide. Two other VSTs that I strongly recommend to people are iZotope's Imager and Tailfilter 2. Imager does what you'd expect. It widens the stereo image. In small doses, it can take a rather static sound and make it feel wide and spacious. Don't overdo it though, otherwise it can sound really shitty. Tailfilter 2 is what came up when I searched for free LFO tool alternatives a while back, and it's surprisingly good for a free plugin. I primarily use it for filter modulation and auto panning, both of which are locked to the tempo of the track. Look, I'm sure there are better ways of going about these things, but I like Tailfilter and hate using automation clips for this purpose, so I'll continue to use it. The only issue that I've ever had with it is that it can become a bit weirdly subdivided with odd time signatures, so you may have to find an alternative solution for that when you don't use 4/4. I'm sure you can use other effects like vocoders and ring mods also, but I've never really experimented with them, so I guess it's something for you to try. It wouldn't be too far-fetched to find them in Dreampunk. I also just want to quickly touch on the order of effects. I imagine that most of you probably know this, but the order in which you place your effects can greatly change how it sounds. For example, putting a phaser after a delay sounds cool on any given sound, but it sounds way better when you put the phaser beforehand in my opinion. The delay is affecting the phaser, meaning that the phased signal becomes delayed. and that the phaser isn't phasing the delayed signal. Therefore, I'll usually place the reverb last to make all of the effects sound well melded together, but that's not always the case. It really depends on what sound you're going for. Another key part of Dreampunk is the ambience. It's often pretty subtle, but it all adds up to improve the overall sound of a track. Sounds such as rain, jungle, or city effects can help immerse the listener and fill the track with sound. It's also often a good idea to put some reverb on field recordings such as these, as it makes it less dry and it fits in better with the rest of the song. Vocals are often another thing that I found within Dreampunk tracks. I love to find some simple conversational vocals and stick a bunch of effects on it, and it adds a nice solid background for the track. Other simple sounds can have a bunch of reverb slapped upon it and placed throughout the track as well, such as vocal shouts, triangles, thunderclaps, and so on. All of these small little details really add together to really capture the Dreampunk sound. The layout of your track is also very important, but there isn't one set way to do so. You'll find 2-minute Dreampunk tracks, and others up to an hour long. Dreampunk as a genre isn't set in stone, so there are many subgenres of Dreampunk to explore, all with different metas for layout. But the most important thing to do is to keep it interesting. It's all well and good to have a 14-minute track, but if it's static and doesn't change at all, it can get boring. So, there's one key thing that you can do to prevent this, and I cannot stress it enough. Layer and automate your sounds. Please, for the love of God, I'm so sick of hearing 14-minute tracks with nothing going on, please. Create odd-length automation clips that fade your sounds in and out, or automate an EQ spike before a delay or something, but make sure that your sounds are layered and automated to keep it interesting. Add certain sounds and remove others for different sections of the track, or add a B section or something similar, but that's really up to you. Basically, as long as you think the track is interesting, you can set it out however you want. There's just one thing I want to say that relates to this. Please don't make your tracks long for the sake of being long. I know that Dreampunk tracks are often around 8 to 12 minutes in length, but if it doesn't have to be that long, don't force it to be that long unless it can utilise the excess time. Look, this is mostly my personal opinion, and I have tracks that are around that length as well, but I always try to make sure that they stay interesting enough to me so that they can warrant that length. However, both the listener and artist will have different ideas of what is interesting, so all you can do is try your best to meet both expectations. Oh, and just another little side tangent, but I wasn't too sure where else to fit this in, so I thought I'd talk about it now. I want to talk about how to make an album seamless, so that the tracks blend together to make one big listening experience. And I'll show you how I did it with Eve. So yeah, this is the complete project file for Eve, the whole album, not the track. And as you can see, it's not just the individual tracks. Underneath all of these tracks, I have all this, and you may be wondering, oh, what is that? This is all ambience. So, for instance, here we have some nice rain. Over here we've got some more rain. Over here we've got some thunder sounds laid underneath the introduction to Mata. So yeah, the reason why I brought all of this into one project file is so I can make it seamless. Now, I just want to say, I'm not sure how heretical this is in the world of audio engineering, but I'll say what I did anyway. But yeah, please don't crucify me, audio engineers. I don't really know what I'm doing. So yeah, what I did was I started by first producing the tracks. Then I would master them and drag them into this project file. So here we have all of the tracks fully mastered, but as their own individual things in the project file. But you may notice there is no ambience in here because I produced it without the ambience and then obviously added the ambience back in. Now the reason I did this instead of using the ambience in the track is pretty simple really. There are two main reasons. First off, you can make stuff seamless. So evidently here's the transition between Abyss and Tau. So there's the end of Abyss, tail end of Abyss. All of this stuff here is the transition. So we got the train sounds here, panning from one side to the other, and then Tau would start about here. And then you would go ahead and you would start the other track. That's one reason. And the other reason is if you have ambience within the track and you're mastering the track, you may accidentally bring out a bunch of high frequencies that you didn't initially want to. It can muddy up the sound. So that's why I prefer to add it in at the end as opposed to adding it in during the production of the track. So what I'll do after all this is I'll export it all. So for example, here we have the entire exported track. Give it a second to load in. It is a big MP3 file. What you would want to do, don't export this as an MP3 file. I only exported this as an MP3 file as an example, just for this little clip here. But make sure that when you're exporting all of this, you export it in the highest resolution possible. So the highest quality WAV that you can. It's probably going to end up being like 2 gigabytes, but you need all that extra quality for when you're going to upload this. So yeah, obviously here we have the complete full album. Now what I would actually do is I'd actually open this in Audacity, but I'm using Audacity to record my voice. So just imagine me doing this in Audacity. I would go ahead with the entire project file. I would make a cut where I think the track would transition. Go ahead and make another cut. Go ahead and make another cut, etc., etc. You would go back and forth until you've made all your cuts. And of course, when you play between the cuts, it transitions perfectly. So that is essentially how you make a seamless album. You do all those little cuts, you bring it all into one project file, you make it all sound pretty, make sure that it isn't clipping, and then yeah, and there you go, voila, seamless album. Okay, so I'm not really much of a visual artist or storyteller, but I thought I'd still touch on this because I think it's important. Personally, the visuals and theming of an album are a really big part of the listening experience for me. Good album art can help the listener set the scene, and if you have an idea in your head of a good theme for an album, it can make the entire project feel more cohesive. For example, for Eve, I knew that I wanted it to be my city-inspired album, so I kept that in mind throughout the entire project. Then, for the album art, I had some skyscrapers and some other stuff, just so that when the listener first listens to the album, they have that image in their head for the duration of the project. Another totally optional thing to do is write a short story for the album. Although often hidden in the About This Album section on Bandcamp, reading it beforehand can improve the overall album experience. I don't personally do this because I'm not a fantastic writer, but it does help add to the album if you have the time and energy to do it. Of course, you don't have to follow any of this advice at all. There are still Dreampunk albums, primarily compilations, with no particular theme at all that sound fantastic as a single project. So, go as wild as you'd like with the theming of your album. Just to round things out, I think it's important to talk about inspiration. I don't really find myself listening to too much Dreampunk around the same time that I'm working on tracks, just because I think that I can accidentally merge ideas that are my own and ideas that I've heard from other tracks. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing to borrow ideas from others, but I try my best not to, and instead I'll turn to other genres for inspiration. A big one for me is actually psych rock because it shares a lot of similar themes to Dreampunk, even though stylistically, it's completely different. And if you've talked to me before, you'll know that I absolutely froth psych rock. However, if you want to listen to music that sounds semi-dreampunky but not really, older ambient tracks from the greats such as Hiroshi Yoshimura, Gigi Mason, or Brian Eno are all fantastic places to start if you're searching for inspiration. Orchestral music also surprisingly shares many themes of Dreampunk, especially the more intense Dreampunk tracks. And if you're really running dry on inspiration, just try producing a track in another genre. I find that a lot of my production knowledge comes from my time producing future funk, boom bap, and drum and bass, or just anything else that isn't really Dreampunk. I hope you enjoyed this video and that it was able to help you. Sorry that I didn't mention anything about music theory or chord progressions or melody or whatever. I honestly don't really know all that much about it, and I don't feel like spitting incorrect or bad information. Maybe in the future when I'm more comfortable with it, I'll make another video on it, who knows. Also, all of this is just my own view on Dreampunk. I'm sure 100 different producers would have 100 different opinions and bits of advice for those looking to get into the genre. Well, if there's anything else you'd like to know, anything Dreampunk related you want to talk about, drop a comment below and I'll answer it if I can. So, get dreaming.